Hey everybody, this is Erman Brady, and we are here with Brandon Waits of HorrOrigins Festival. We're just continuing the previous conversation we had a few weeks ago. Today we have Adam Hendricks and Greg Gilreath of Divide and Conquer. Gentlemen, thanks for coming back and chatting with us again. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Good to be back.
Yeah. So, Brandon, you want to take it away with the first few questions?
Oh, yeah. Well, so we ended up getting disconnected last time on the question about you guys' collaboration with Blumhouse. And Greg, you were in the middle of having, your conversation about valuable advice that maybe Jason or the Blumhouse team has shared with you guys. So I would like to give that to you so, you can actually finish what you were saying.
Oh man, that's a big one. I could not remember for the life of me where we left off.
I remember we did I think Greg and I by ourselves recorded something. I don't know, did you ever get a chance to see that?
Yeah, I did. Greg was talking about like how it's important. How do I word it? The making of the movie is important. Does that make sense?
Oh, maybe,
I don't know.
I think we were talking about kind of not getting bogged down in the specifics or try to make things perfect in development, but rather just like allow like the creative process to happen so that like surprises can emerge out of them.
Yeah,
I think that was the thing, that like not being precious was a big thing. I mean, that
right.
said, like, you try and make as good a script as you can. You try and get it as good as you can. But then when you get into production, you sort of just go.
Exactly.
But I'll say this. I mean, like it's been crazy having Blumhouse, both Jason, but also the company as like a mentor, because like we've been mentored on all sides by the CEO and their posts and head of development and production. And it's just like they've each person has bestowed on us some actionable advice that we still listen to this day. I mean, I think that like it's and there's so much of it. Like it's making sure that the scares really land, but it's also making sure that there's like drama that if you remove all the elements, there's dramatic like underpinning. That this could be, I think they like to say like it would, this could be like an indie Sundance movie, if not for like the genre scares. So yeah, it's
pretty good.
Yeah, you really like that?
He's like what he said.
Regurgitate stuff already. Yeah.
When do you have a phone next to your laptop?
Something's yeah, something's buzzing.
Oh, I don't know. That might be me. My speakers are all fucked up here. Hold on one sec.
No worries, sir.
Okay.
Maybe use the computer speakers.
Yeah, I can. Hold on. Let me get my phone. Hold on. I'll be right back.
Sure. Adam, how you been keeping busy during quarantine?
I'm really fortunate. We are really fortunate because we've been doing projects back to back to back, and we were really close to. Oh man, yeah, the streak was bad, huh?
Yeah, sorry. My laptop speaker, I think, blew out.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's fine.
Blame Brandon.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally.
Sorry.
Here you
Yeah,
go.
my
No,
fault.
you good.
Go on, Adam.
Oh, I was just saying, staying busy during quarantine. I mean, like, I think that we're really fortunate in the sense that we were just saying we were doing so much up until this happened. Like, we were very close to like taking some time off at the beginning of the year, and instead opted to do a movie because it was like a really great project. And I'm so glad we did, because we had to stop mid-production, and now we have all this time, and so I think we're like finally catching our breath after years. So I mean, I'm filling my days like catching up on watching things and reading things and spending quality time with my wife and dog, who I barely seen over the last year. Greg, how about you?
Exactly what you said, but adding in, I don't know, cooking a lot, growing new plants.
Being proactive, I love it. My next question for you folks is, I'm coming from a screenwriter's perspective because I'm a writer myself. And so I assume a lot of new writers approach you folks. So we want to know, what are some do's and don'ts that new writers should know before approaching you about a script?
I mean, that's tough. We get sent a lot of scripts. One, don't take it personally if we don't want to come onto a project. It's like a really, I think, important thing new writers or directors need to internalize. That it's not a personal rejection of them or even their talent. It could be so many factors. One, it's not a right fit. Two, if we're going to come onto a project, we want to know that we have a pathway to get the movie actually made, so it doesn't just sit around for a long time. And that saying we're not going to produce, your film, like making a movie is so hard, and it's so hard to take a project from script to finished film, that there's only so much bandwidth that we have, and that you have to just understand that. And then two, I would say something, a screenwriter who just sends us a script and is like, hey, okay, go do all the work, you guys, good luck, tell me when the movie's getting made, is so that's a project and people were so unlikely to have long-term partnerships with, because again, it's so hard to get a movie made. It's like you want people who not just are good writers, but add value, whether that's ideas for, casting or directors to bring on or whatever, people who just have hustle, who are willing to jump in with you and sort of help carry some of that load.
Fantastic. Very, very good. Brandon, you want to ask the next question?
Sure. So, Greg, this is kind of for you because I watched the interview that you did before. Like many great entrepreneurs, there's a process they have in place for their companies. I had Marcus Lemonis, for example. He has his 3 Ps: people, process, product. You've discussed before your 3 pillars: money, art, and relationships. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by that?
Yeah. So essentially, like, again, going back to how hard it is to take a script, even when it's got somewhat of a package from on paper to finished film that's released out into the world. So you have to sort of weigh what are the benefits, what are the reasons to get involved, and sort of Adam and I have distilled over the years those 3 things. And it's not just one thing or, hey, we need 2 of these things. It's kind of a sliding scale, but it's, does this thing, we all have to make a living and live in the world and pay rent and kids and school and car and all that kind of shit. So it's like, does this project pay us enough money that it makes our lives easier, or allows us to live our lives? To art, is this just something that we think could be so good that we're willing to push that boulder up the hill for 10 years in order to see it made because it's just that special and that important, we think? Or relationships, is this a director we want to work with? Is this a studio we want to work with? Are there actors that we want to work with? Are these writers that we want to work with? Are there other producers that we want to work with? And just sort of, is this project a way to build, continuing further relationships with people? Because at the end of the day, we don't take the approach that it's a project by project thing, really. It's more about how do you build long-term partnerships with people for careers. Like, we'd rather make 10 movies with somebody than 1.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that when we first started, like, we wanted one of the 3 really strongly, and as we keep going and get to be, as we become step by step, little by little more successful, like, we then get to say, like, okay, let's make sure we actually check a couple of these off the box, and maybe we can get all 3. Like, I think that's the sort of that's how we're sort of evaluating our own progress, is our ability to be picky in those regards.
I love it. It's all about relationships, guys. Love that. My next question is, once again, from the screenwriter's perspective, and it's kind of a 2-parter, really. So one is, is there a way to kind of, when you read a screenplay, do you automatically see, okay, this could be a hit, or is that stuff like chance? Is our hits chance? And if so, what kind of elements do you see in a screenplay that makes you go, okay, I can see this definitely doing well at the box office and with the audience? And 2, when it comes to screenwriting a horror film, should the writer put in scares in the screenplay, or should that be left for the director?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So wait, there was a few questions.
Hits or luck? Hits are always luck.
You hit your luck. Yeah, that's about hitting something in the zeitgeist. I think when you read a script, like, I think you're asking yourself a few questions. I mean, the first question is, do you like it? And that's the biggest thing for us. Like, no matter what, at the end of the day, we have to sit across from various people, whether they be financiers or actors or department heads. and say this is great and mean it. And I don't think we're just not bullshit artists. Like we can't say we love something when we don't. Like that passion has to be real. So the first question is, do we actually like this? Second is like, is it doing something new? You know, we talk about this a lot, like, which is like, does it have a big idea? Does it, you know, people say like socially conscious horror, and that exists, but like, I think there's just a bigger thing of like, does the thing that you're watching, does it mean something outside of its basic plot and characters? And then I think lastly, like there is that sort of like, you know, undefinable thing of like, could this be exciting on a larger level? I mean, for instance, we did an erotic thriller recently, and you know, we had the script a couple of years ago, and I remember being like, oh yeah, we're not seeing these right now. This is very exciting, you know, having a project that feels, you know, that's tapping into something from the past that people aren't, you know, that you don't see a lot of. Like we see a lot of noir and westerns and people trying to like resurrect the same genre over and over again, but sometimes sometimes you just get surprised by something like that. So maybe there's some like interesting formalistic nature to the screenplay, like it has an interesting perspective, or you know, it's tapping into an old genre, but it's just some sort of magical thing where you say to yourself, oh, an audience hasn't really seen this delivered like this before.
But even in those circumstances and the best executed version of that at the right moment, it could still not become a box office hit, because like Adam said, you have to hit a cultural zeitgeist at the exact right moment in the exact right way to become part of the cultural conversation. And that's something that you can try for, but you can't engineer. It's just not possible. Yeah.
Great.
Another question.
Writing scares into the screenplay.
Yes. So, I mean, I'll say this, like, it's really hard to do it, but we've seen it. I've been scared reading a screenplay before, a good screenplay. And, you know, it's going to be a different art than a filmmaker. It's so interesting, right? Because you don't have to, as a screenwriter, you don't have to build the tension in. You more than likely have to like set up these foundational scenes or moments at which like a director can extrapolate how, you know, where to pull the audience through like a tense beat. But I do think that there's something to tense writing, and it's more about like setting a tone and a pace. It's hard to do a jump scare in a screenplay, and like sometimes we joke around a bit because like we'll schedule, you know, part of production is scheduling based on a screenplay, and we joke sometimes because we're doing horror films that sometimes like, you know, a very small sliver of the page might be like someone walks down a hallway, but then when we go out and film it, like it takes like, it's like 8 different shots, and it's like, you know, the scene plays out over like 5 minutes because it's someone like crawling slowly, and you have to get their feet and their finger hitting a light switch, and you know, it's different when you film a horror script. But I mean, I think there's sort of like a bigger question, which is, you know, should a writer be attempting to influence a tone on a script? And I think that's a big yes. I mean, I think that like the best writers we've written know how to use negative space on the page. They know how to sort of like, they know whether their prose should be flowery and expressive for a certain moment, or it should just be like quick and dashed for another scene. I think that you know, what you're trying to do as a writer outside of good characters and story and plotting is in the same way as like a novelist has to, like really pull the reader through an experience.
Yeah, and that's especially true when you're at an early stage and you're trying to bring on financiers or a director or whatever. It's like the experience of reading the script should be enticing in a way that it makes, you know, the reader have thoughts or like, you know, an attachment to the script beyond just like, oh, I could see that be a movie. Like you want the experience of reading the script to be something that is enjoyable or tense or whatever on its own. And that's like a big boost in getting a movie like set up at, like with development executives or like, you know, with a financier or something like that. Like it helps a lot.
Thank you so much. From a writer's perspective, that really meant a lot, especially as someone who wants to write horror. So thank you so much for that. As you can see, we're quarantined. I would say a lot of the, but I would say more so, all of the sets are closed down right now during quarantine. So that alone shows a lot of change that has to come post-COVID. So for you guys, do you see a lot of changes in the industry post quarantine, and if so, what would those changes be? I know it's a very broad question, but do you see a lot of changes for the industry coming up?
Yes. I mean, nobody knows. Honestly, nobody knows, and nobody can speak to anything with any authority, and anybody who pretends they know the answer is lying or, being overly confident. So it's like, we don't know. I'd say the biggest thing that I think we're seeing in terms of what's changing is that theatrical distribution has already been like sort of on edge, and that you're seeing it with like the Universal stuff and them releasing things straight to VOD, that the studios are probably going to use this to try to shorten the theatrical window as much as they can, or get like day and date to be more of a regular thing. Like for me, the distribution end with that seems to be the number one area where we're most likely to see change. Yeah.
That's a good answer. I think that, I think people will always want to be emotionally affected by stories. And I think that those stories will have to change, not just in the way that, not just in terms of their content to address like people's phobias and fears of like the present, but I also think that, it's going to change based on how like viewing habits change. And I think that, right, I think with theatrical becoming less and less of a thing and people staying at home, it's like, what can you do to create content that really grabs people and really gives them that emotional charge, knowing that a lot of people are now starting to like be incredibly more and more passive about how they watch things. I don't have the answer for that. It's just something that like I chew on at night.
Yeah.
It's a waiting game. You just never know. You never know what's ahead.
And I think to that end too, just something to look at is like different philosophies among the different streamers. So like one streamer we've worked with is all about content and data and sort of like, how do you bring content to people that uses the data to make sure they watch it? And then another streamer we've worked with recently has been like, we don't care so much about that. We still want to make capital M movies and treat a streaming release like a theatrical release. So I think we're also going to see in the streaming market diversification of strategies for releases that will hopefully not just be a like giant content dump at all times for all people. So like that might be one other thing that comes out of it as well, because I think what Adam said is very important about a lot of these distributors do recognize that if you do, and this goes back to your question about when you read something, can you make a hit? It's like something that affects people widely will always have a place. And there will always be people who want that. And there will always be people who are willing to pay for that. And there will always be people willing to finance and sort of take the risk on putting those things out. So it's like, no matter what the distribution landscape looks like, movies, TV, whatever form, film evolves into, it will always exist and will always have a place no matter what, despite COVID, despite theatrical going away, despite the rise of streaming, whatever, like it will still always be a thing in some way.
That's great. So I'm going to jump ahead to your guys' projects. You guys worked on Cam and the Wind, 2 horror films. How, as producers, did those projects come to be within your hands? And another question to go with that. What is it about the horror genre that you guys like?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of those 2 projects, like we have a lot of we have projects that we develop internally. We also have projects that we've like partnered on that like were originated outside of us. Like in both of those projects that, Blumhouse had seen the screenplay to Cam and sent it to us and asked if we wanted to come on board, and we jumped on it. And in terms of The Wind, that was another company called Soapbox, who same thing. Like they had the project and they needed partners who knew production and knew the different stages actually after production in terms of festival, release, sales, marketing. So we partner up a lot like that, which is nice. Like I think there's something egotistical about like wanting to be the producer who like originates the idea, then gets the screenwriter and gets the director. It's like, we don't care about that. Like we love just being parts of movies at any part in the process. We just want to be part of like that rocket fuel that sends something that's like could be an idea or a script or a rough edit, whatever, of a film, like into its final version and then out into the world. That's what we do. Okay. In terms of what was the everything? It's hard to do second parts to questions.
No worries. Sorry about that. What about the horror genre do you guys enjoy?
I mean, I think that I like all genres, and I think Greg, I think we feel the same with that. I might lean a little more horror than Greg, but I think that like for the most part, we love all genres. And I think that the great thing about any genre is that it's the opportunity to, again, within like a very safe space, like experience a high level of emotion. And it doesn't always have to be horror. It could also be like a tearjerker. Like you can go through the process of having like dealt with like a family trauma and then really emotionally feel that, and then the movie ends and like it's safe, you're okay. Also, like I heard a really good can't remember where I read it, or someone was talking about why we're all obsessed with with Contagion right now, given that we're experiencing, like how could you be interested in like non-escapist, it's something that's so close to what we're doing. And they put it in an interesting way, because they agreed with the whole like having the, like your emotions experienced in a safe environment, but they also pointed out that like even in something like Contagion, like that's there are still borders to that world. It's still a closed story. There's still like a beginning, middle, and an end, and we all want that ending. And so in a weird way, it still is escapist, because like we get to like experience the end of this pandemic that we're in. But going back to the horror for a second, I think that there's technique. There's such a high level of technique in horror, and it's kind of really come out in the last like 10 or 20 years. I think there was always, there's been Hitchcocks throughout time through film history, but for the most part, horror was really it's been like a counterculture thing, where it's like the ideas have stood out more than necessarily the techniques. And but every now and then you'll see something great. You'll see like a Carpenter film with like a lot of negative space and using animal. Like you'll see attention to technique. But what's strange is that in the last, like I said, 10 or 20 years, like we've really seen like this crazy focus on the craftsmanship of horror, and it's been so effective for an audience, because like again, I don't want to call out films, but you'll see like you'll go to a theater, you'll watch a movie where like the plot ramps up, the plot doesn't make that much sense. You're introduced to the characters, there's not really good acting. And then the scary thing happens, you're like, oh my God, I hope they're okay. I hope they get through it. And you're like, wow, the power of film, like the power to not have an audience. And then all of a sudden, like you care so deeply for these fictional characters. Right. So I say that to say that because the technique is so apparent, and it's so obvious now that like you can grab a theater full of people. It's like, now what do you do with that power? And so I think that the thing that interests us, and I hope you see it in films like Cam and The Wind, which is like, if you can grab those people, what else can you do with them? And so it's like, it's taking the technique to the top, but also like implanting something deeper, whether that's like, morals or societal lessons, or just trying to introduce people to like a new perspective that maybe they aren't that used to, or opening them up to a new world. I think that like the power in genres is nearly immeasurable.
Thank you so much for that, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure hearing from you. But before we jump over to
I'm so sorry. I have to take a call.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Here we are, Greg.
What a jerk.
Before we jump over to the audience questions, we just have a few lightning round kind of questions. Really fun questions that are just super easy. First off, what are some upcoming projects that you're excited to see as a fan of cinema?
Oh man, that's a great question. You mean like things that are coming out soon that I want to see?
Absolutely.
Oh shit. There are so many that right now I don't have a good answer for you, because everything's been so upended right now, and we've been so deep in making things. I would have a shitty answer and say there's a couple of things that we have coming out that I'm really excited for people to see. Like there's this movie Freaky that Chris Landon directed that we did that is, I think, incredible, and people are gonna love it, and it's just like so fun and weird and out there, and I'm excited for that.
Weird and out there, I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say too much about it, but let's just say it's got Vince Vaughn in his like comeback role in a way that I think the world's going to be really excited about, because it's Vince Vaughn at his most Vince Vaughn. Adam, I'm talking about Freaky a little bit, where he basically plays a teenage girl, and it's great.
A teenage girl?
Yeah, that's right.
Vince Vaughn's one of my favorites, so that's pretty awesome.
November 13th. Hopefully you can see it in theaters.
I don't know if that's true, and I don't think we're allowed to talk about that.
Never mind.
Never mind.
Discard.
It's part of the
I didn't say. I didn't.
Asking.
No specifics.
We're just asking him what. We're just asking what. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, great. I don't think the plot has been released either.
I didn't say anything.
Okay.
No, we're just scrap that part.
Also, don't publish any of that.
We're just curious as to we're doing a lightning round kind of thing, so we're curious as to what projects you're interested in seeing coming out as a fan of film. So
I'm like the equivalent of like the music fan who like just puts on random music in the hopes of finding that gem. Like I don't get it. I rarely get excited about sort of like, that's not true. I sometimes get excited about like certain filmmakers, obviously, any great filmmaker. But for me, like it's just like it's the discovery stuff. I love going to a film festival and walking into something I know nothing about, and then being introduced to a new filmmaker.
That's pretty good. Although I do have one. Leos Carax made a new movie that I saw a couple minutes of, and it looks insane, and I very much want to see that. Yeah.
There you go. Our next lightning round. Oh, go ahead, Brendan.
Yeah, and we did ask Greg, what upcoming project of yours are you excited for? And that's when he mentioned Freaky and Vaughn. So he really didn't go in depth or anything. Without giving details, which project, if you could give the name of the project, are you excited of yours that's coming out soon?
Can I say the same one?
Yeah.
No, you know what, I'll say The Voyeurs, which is the erotic thriller that I mentioned before with Amazon and a filmmaker that we work with, Mike Mohan. But I'll also say this, like, we're excited about anything with filmmakers that we've worked with in the past. That's the best reward, is continuing to work with the same people and seeing them evolve and create new stories. Yeah,
that's great. So are we allowed to say Vince Vaughn or no? I don't want to.
Yes.
Okay, so you guys mentioned Vince Vaughn. So you've worked around some of the top talent in Hollywood. Was there ever an instance where either one of you were starstruck?
I don't care.
I would say it's almost the opposite, where we will. This has happened to me like a couple times, where like you start working with the person, you're just in the trenches, and then maybe like during one day during production, you're like, oh my God, this is so weird. If my young self could see this right now, they would like freak out. But we don't have the space or opportunity. Yeah, there's not even like the headspace to be like starstruck or enamored. It's just like work all the time, and then you're like, you take a weird break, you're like, this is so bizarre. All right, and then you just get right back to it.
And it's a good reminder that they're just people too,
right?
That they're just people doing a job who happen to be extremely talented and famous, but that at the end of the day, you get past that layer of sort of outward celebrity, and like Adam said, you're just partnering and working on something, and you're just like, hey, we're just people doing a thing. Yeah.
There's no one that I would cross the street to go talk to if I like saw them. That said, the only times I will like talk to anyone, not even famous, it's just like that's like known, is if I know that I have something I can say that would make their day better. You know what I mean by that? Like every now and then there'll be someone who that we're in the same circles with or something where because I've read some like obscure script they wrote or just something, just be like, hey, I just want like I really like that, and I think that's appropriate. But I think that I don't know. Yeah, someone once said, "Never meet your idols," and it's a really good point. Like you'll. It doesn't really bring you anything outside of like the best thing that they've ever done is their work, not necessarily like their presence.
And something one actor said to me once was, meeting new people, it's very hard because you instantly assume they want something from you, and that you're always going to be on guard because you don't know what that person wants from you. So I've always taken real like caution to not be like that, to not, and I think that comes from a lot of fans and a lot of people from the outside looking in, and it's like, I think if you approach people just as people and treat them like that, it's actually the best most productive way to get things done. Yeah.
I can
Makes
relate to
sense.
that. Not meeting your idols, like you meet them and you're like, oh, they're kind of douchebags.
Yeah. Be careful.
But gentlemen, thank you so much for that. We do have some fan questions, or sorry, audience questions that were submitted to us. So let's get into those. First up is from Kieran Nolan J from Twitter. Kieran asked, what's the best method / avenue for UK producers looking to join forces with US producers for feature film co-productions? Also, which states in the US have the best tax incentives for feature films?
Oh, two questions. I go to the second one. The incentive is hard. I mean, Georgia, New Mexico, it's like the places you hear all the movies. Pennsylvania has a really good one. But that landscape's always that landscape's always changing, and they go away, they come back. So it's just like an evolving sort of, you never know, and you have to look at any given time and something about the tax incentives I think a lot of people don't really think about is a lot of those states run out of money. And so if you're Utah or something and say like the TV show Yellowstone shoots there, that they take the tax incentive fund for like 10 years completely. And smaller movies might not be able to get anything, even though on paper they have a really good one. So like there's a lot of digging you have to do if you want to shoot for a tax incentive state. Yeah. What was the other question? How can a UK person partner on a co-production? Like I would say it depends on what that means, right? Does that mean there's a UK film that wants to shoot in the US and they need partners on the ground? Does that mean they have some government money and they want to get equity financing from US financiers? Does that mean they are looking for US projects to bring to the UK, in order to help get bigger projects to the UK so you can use some of the UK government money for a project that already exists? That like the scenario is different for all of those things, so it's really hard to answer.
What was the first part of
The first question was about like how can someone from the UK partner up with somebody in the US for collaborations or / co-productions? Like what's the best approach to people in the US?
God, Greg, I don't know.
Yeah.
You have any suggestion?
Well, I mean, there's just like, it depends. Do you have a project with a strong director? It's different than if you just, again, like the specifics of the scenario for the UK producer will determine all of that. And that's a shitty answer, but that's because there is kind of no answer.
Right.
A big attraction to a lot of US producers on co-productions is how do we get some of the European government funding? And if you can offer an avenue for that to US producers, you're going to have people lining up. If you're like, hey, I've got an in with BFI here and they're looking for strong projects with strong directors, like if you can bring 40% of the money, I can get the government put the other 60% of the money. Like that's a different conversation than I'm a UK producer and I've got the script and I want somebody to help me package it and raise financing out of the US. Like totally different. Yeah.
Great. So Jennifer Trudrung, from Facebook has asked, horror subgenres seem to come in waves depending on the times, and I'm curious about what subgenre you think the next wave of horror films will be about. I'm a screenwriter, and currently the last thing I want to write about is a pandemic or zombies.
Yep.
My guess would be body horror or horror comedy. Thanks.
Please don't write pandemic scripts. Please don't write scripts that are about quarantine. Please don't write scripts about zombies as a metaphor for our current state. Like, just please don't do that. Like that's the low-hanging fruit. That's what so many people are trying to do, and it's just nobody's going to want that. Yeah.
I think that what we're experiencing is, don't look at the surface level stuff, because I don't think people will respond to that. I think it's like there's something deeper going on about our, like, why is there this giant line of like between distrust of politicians and distrust of scientists? Like, what's going on a global level, but not what's going on on a global level, like what's going on a personal level, and like how do we tap into that? And I think that you can use templates of the past and sort of rejigger them for today. And I think, yeah, like there could be body horror because sometimes maybe the same way that we're trapped in this, now I'm just being like silly, but not the same way that we're all trapped in our houses, maybe we're trapped in our bodies, and how do we like use that subgenre to explore that? You know, look at how like vampires have been like used time and time again for completely different purposes to reflect like what's going on in society, whether that's like invasion of people from Eastern Europe as it was like originally used in Dracula, or to the AIDS epidemic or STDs. And like I think it's the same thing here, where I don't know what the next subgenre is going to be. You know, I will say I kind of really liked the early 2000s when like the subgenre was like technophobia, especially coming out of like Asian countries. Like I think that like, you know, Ringu and Pulse and those were like really sort of their time, and I hope some people can tap into something like that. But I don't think the answer is like, yeah, like Zoom horror.
Thank you so much. We do have one more, if you don't mind. Craig Drahim from Twitter asked, usually people avoid period pieces because of production design and costumes costs. How do you tackle the Wind's production design and costumes on a smaller budget?
Oh, first and foremost, contained. Like if you look at the Wind, it takes place in basically 2 houses, right? And that's it. So that goes a long way towards that. There's not a lot of characters. Most of it has 1 person. At most it has like 5, but for the most part it's 1 or 2 people. So that's like the number one thing about tackling low budget period, is just make sure that you're smart about it. And then on that one, you know, production design side, we had the production designers on that are these 2 twins, the Andahar twins, Hillary and Courtney, and they're just absolute geniuses. And they hustled and they made things, and they went to every thrift store in New Mexico, and they just, you know, it's time, right? It's like if you have the time to go hunt for things that are appropriate, like if you're like, hey, we're going to manufacture every single thing in this cabin and period appropriate, that's a bad plan. You're never going to do that. So it's just about, do you have a team that has like craftiness and the ability to be sort of think outside the box and, you know, make connections, and wherever you're shooting with sort of like local communities, whether it's thrifters or reenactors or things like that, and just sort of get help from those communities.
And Greg and I have like a philosophy of like, for the films that we work on, we of course want great story and great characters, but for us, like we like to have that extra level of costumes, production design, the whole mise en scène, because I think that that's our way of sort of elevating our projects above other sort of independent productions. But yeah, I mean, I think that speaking to the Andahar is like one of the ways you do, like, it's not us, right? Like we're not the ones, it's the film. You have to find a filmmaker that cares, and then you have to partner them up with department heads that you can trust. And so for us, like, you know, in the same way that we want to work with the same directors, like we're also collecting these amazing department heads, so that, you know, when we have a new project with a new filmmaker who maybe doesn't know the right people to partner up with, we can say, hey, we worked with so and so, they delivered on this level, let's put you guys together.
That's great. And it looks like you guys answered all the questions that we have written up. Is there any parting advice or plugs that you guys want to share? Social media handles, if you want followers. Any parting words?
The only thing I'll say, and it's just because this is like a, you know, to the horror community, because I do, like, I go to we go to Fantastic Fest, and I watch, and I subscribe to Shudder, and I consume a ton of horror, consume stuff outside of horror, consume stuff like watch art films, watch dramas, watch musicals, because you can pull that in and give horror audiences something they've never seen before. If we keep regurgitating the same shit, it's just going to be the snake eating the tail. So it's like whatever you can to like absorb media outside of sort of what everyone else is doing, that's going to be the stuff that inspires you to create something fresh and unique.
And just to spin off of that a little bit, and what Adam just said before too, it's like, don't ignore, especially in the low budget world, formalism is not the right word, but the cohesive elements of filmmaking, production design, costume design, makeup, hair, lighting, and like stylization, like all of those things are so important, and making sure that it's not just about scares it's not just about even character and story. It's about the whole thing and all of the pieces working together in a cohesive manner. And like, that's what really is memorable to me. Like, I think a lot about right now, lately in the last couple of years, God, maybe even the last 10 years, like the most affecting horror film I've seen is Midsummer. You know, in Midsummer, on every single level of that, like the planning and the thought that went into every single detail is something that I will remember probably forever, and is like so impressive and so much more affecting to me than just sort of like Adam said, like a Xerox of a movie people saw when they were a kid in the 80s. Like, I don't want to see somebody's just regurgitated version of, you know, whatever, like Jason or Freddy or whatever, like they grew up with. It's like, how are you pushing things forward? How are you putting your own spin on something? How are you caring about moving not just horror, but the art of cinema forward with what you're doing? And that's how you really like make an impression on people.
Great stuff. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure hearing from you and a pleasure meeting you folks for the first time. So tune in, guys, to our next interview with Origins, and don't forget to check out HorrOrigins.com and HorrOrigins on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Adam Hendricks and Greg Gilreath of Divide and Conquer. See you guys next time.
Guys,
Nice.
later.
Thank you, guys.